father wanted her to be placed in what was called high keeping. Under this arrangement, a prostitute would be handsomely rewarded if she agreed to become the exclusive property of one wealthy man.
Higher class courtesans would have lived a life of superb luxury, would have had the finest dresses, the finest silks, eat off silver plate and entertain nobles, and live basically what would have been the life of an elite woman.
At the top end, there were incredible amounts of money to be earned. A high-class courtesan working for an aristocratic client, say, could earn perhaps £5 in the evening, which would be the equivalent of an annual salary for a female servant.
It was common for charming, well-mannered women to become mistresses, and many middle-ranking prostitutes wanted to make themselves the kept women of wealthy clients. To find the right man, the more discerning woman might cruise London's pleasure gardens, assembly rooms, or theatres.
The aristocratic woman was contained to her box, watching the play on the stage, whereas the prostitutes would have been circulating in the galleries overhead. But it was always rumoured that a prostitute could be identified through her makeup. And although aristocratic women did adorn their faces, if you wore rouge, it suggested that you'd lost the blush of your modesty, so it suggested you'd lost your virginity.
Miss Wilkins. She is not above 20 and has a very engaging countenance. She's a very good piece, and if you can forget she's hunchbacked, she is a little Venus.
Ensnaring a wealthy client was a distant dream for most of London's lower-grade prostitutes. Known as bunters and bulkmongers, many were half-starved and homeless women who sold their bodies simply to survive.
As you go down the social scale, most prostitutes working the streets of London would hope to earn perhaps 2 shillings, 2.5 shillings for a sexual act, which, in terms of what it can buy, is little more than what you would need to live on the streets for a day or two. And there are women, particularly in places like Charing Cross at this time, who will go behind a fence for a penny or two.
The careers of most prostitutes would be nasty, brutal and short. The average streetwalker would be on the game for just 4 years. By the time they reached their mid-20s, most were considered well past their prime, though there were exceptions.
Mrs. Hamblin, number 1 Naked Boy Court. The young lady in question is not above 56. We should not have introduced her here, but that on account of her long experience, we know that she must be particularly useful to elderly gentlemen.
But of course a woman could always fool her customer into thinking she was a fresh piece.
You may think that a virgin is a virgin, but no, a virgin could be a virgin several times over. And the way you did it was by a certain lotion which you painted in the obvious place, which at least produced the effect of virginity. Unfortunately, there was a small boy once in the kitchen of one of these houses, and he got hold of this lotion, and just out of curiosity he painted his face with it, and the poor boy's mouth puckered up and he couldn't open it for hours. Luckily he eventually was rescued with some hot, greasy soup.
Other methods that prostitutes and bawds used to actually fake maidenheads, one of these was to either use a sponge or a piece of dried meat inserted into the vagina, which they'd hide in the bedhead. And a scene that denotes this is in Fanny Hill, where she actually hides it in the bedpost and then quickly whips it out and pretends she's this blood has suddenly appeared and she was a virgin.
By faking virginity, women could earn fast returns and a healthy profit. Such deceits were invaluable to part-time prostitutes, many of whom were unemployed actresses or domestic servants. It was not uncommon for lower middle-class girls, such as milliners and haberdashers, to supplement their incomes by offering sexual favours to men. In a world without welfare, where life was precarious, even prosperous families could suddenly fall on hard times. For an educated girl without a dowry, becoming a rich man's plaything was a way to secure a life of comfort.
Although it's easy to see the life of the kept mistress as one of glamour and excitement, the reality was that she very rarely married her man. The Ladder of Quality shows this, which depicts the aristocratic women racing up the ladder, trying to get higher and higher, but at the bottom is the mistress who's fallen on her head. Her body is exposed, but she's unable to make it onto the first step.
In her late 20s, Charlotte Hayes became the kept mistress of Robert Beau Tracy, a man rumoured to have one of the greatest fortunes in England. She used his good name to run up enormous bills all over town, and in exchange was expected to be faithful to him. Instead, she betrayed him by conducting a flagrant affair with his friend Sam Derrick. But Tracy exacted his own revenge. When he died unexpectedly, he left her nothing in his will. Even after she'd pawned everything she had, Charlotte still couldn't pay back her debts and ended up in the Fleet prison. It was a shocking fall from fame and fortune.
The prison itself would have been smelling of urine, full of rats, full of cockroaches, full of insects. It would have been a most revolting place to have remained, and very often just actually being there would have killed people.
If a woman ended up in prison for whatever reason, she would have a very thin time indeed. If she had the money, she could supplement the allowance of a piece of bread and a little water every day, which was what the state would stand her. But if she had no money, she'd be chucked into wards where the totally penniless were kept. And a man who chose to tip the jailer a shilling could come along and run his eye over the night's take, as it were, and say, "I'll have that one."
Most prostitutes in the prisons of London were there as a result of theft. There is no juicier opportunity for theft than a drunk and lust-filled man out looking for commercial sex on the streets.
Lucy Peterson, St Martin's Lane. She's not pretty, neither ugly, but is as lewd as goats and monkeys, and she generally has a design upon a friend's watch or handkerchief. She frequently visits Bridewell, and is, in a homely phrase, a vile bitch.
If a woman was caught having pickpocketed a client, a prostitute could easily find themselves tried at the Old Bailey for their life and hanged or indeed transported to either North America or Australia later on.
But punishing these petty crimes wasn't enough for some. By the late 1750s, moral reformers were becoming increasingly concerned about the booming sex trade, and the authorities were urged to crack down on London's flesh market.
A series of raids were carried out by the authorities in Covent Garden. One can imagine the scene of chaos. Squealing, half-naked girls dragged from their lodgings while their customers tried to escape frantically down the back streets. And then the constables did something no one was expecting. They arrested Jack Harris. He was sentenced to 3 years for pimping and sent to the dreaded Newgate prison.
With the pimp general removed from the scene, it was hoped that the women he lured into prostitution could now be rescued from sin. These women would learn the error of their ways at the Magdalen houses, the first of which was established in 1758.
The Magdalen houses were set up to save fallen women, but the regimes were particularly harsh. The women worked very long hours. They were expected to undertake lots of manual labour. They also had to work within a sort of Christian ethic, and this would involve getting up for prayers in the morning, going to prayers at night, not swearing, behaving themselves, and there would be fines for bad behaviour.
Hetty Dorking, Meads Court. She's the daughter of a reputable tradesman in Wapping and was debauched by her father's porter. She has frequent fits of repentance and has been wavering at the threshold of the Magdalen house.
Not everyone repented, though. In 1760, after her 3-year stint in prison, Charlotte Hayes found herself back on the game and in the pages of Harris's lists. Sam Derrick, who'd once been her lover, wrote, "Time was when this lady was a reigning toast. She has, however, been a good while in eclipse." Prison had indeed taken its toll on her charms, so she decided to salvage what she could and become a madam. The change came at an auspicious moment. In London, the new exclusive French-style brothels known as Sorels were all the rage.